So this is the sample RC. We'll read it. What we'll recommend you is we're going to show the next 3 questions right now. So look those questions, read this, pause the video and then attempt those questions on your own, and then continue to see this explanation along with us so that you'll understand how to tackle a RC. So this is the comprehension. First question, second question and third question. Right, so we'll go back. I hope you have passed at the right places to read the passage and attempt all the 3 questions. So let's get started. So typewriters are the epitome. So what do we mean by epitome? Is like the perfect example sort of it of a technology that has been comprehensively rendered obsolete by the digital age. So obsolete is considered to be not relevant in the current situation. Obsolete by digital age. So what does this mean? So typewriters are the perfect example of a technology that is considered to be old by the latest technology, like by the digital age. Right now we consider typewriters as a old technology. So that's why they're calling it a perfect example. The author continues saying the ink comes off the ribbon, they weigh a ton, and second thoughts are a disaster. So the author continues by talking about the negatives of a typewriter. So you'll see the ink coming off the ribbon, they actually weigh a lot, and the second thoughts are a disaster basically means in a typewriter when you write something and you want to edit it, it's basically a disaster because you cannot do it like how you do in a Word document in a laptop or a desktop where you can just press the backspace and edit it. But here in the typewriter you can't do that, right? You obviously have to redo it from the start and all of those things. So that's why he's talking about the second thoughts being a disaster. But the author, going ahead, they are also personal, portable, and above all, private. So the author is now giving on the other side of the argument. So he's saying, yes, typewriters have all these problems, but they are also personal, portable, and above all, private. So what do they mean by private? Let's continue reading. Type a document and lock it away. More or less, the only way anyone else can get it is if you give it to them. So that's basically saying if I type the document, I can keep it in a lock and I can let no one see that. If I want someone to see or read it, that is when I can give it to them to read it. That is the only way someone can access those documents. Right? So in comparison with the current technology that if I write in a laptop or a desktop, there's a good chance that the systems could get hacked, the documents could get access, people can get access through internet and all the digital issues that we basically face. There's always some chance that someone can access our files without our permission. So that is why Russians have decided to go back to typewriters in some government offices, and why in the US some departments have never abandoned them. So the author is continuing saying that because of this very important point about the security element, that the Russians have gone back to typewriters in some government offices, and in US some departments have never abandoned them. Yet it is not just their resistance to algorithm and secret surveillance that keeps typewriter production lines. So the author is saying it's not just that typewriters are resistant to the algorithms, the hacking sort of behavior and secret survival, and someone might secretly survive, look at these documents and get the information. These are not the only reasons that keep the typewriter production lines, right? And then the author continues saying, well, one at least in the business. So he's saying at least there's one company which is doing this production of typewriters, and then in the bracket they said the last British one closed a year ago. So the author said it is not just this that's keeping the typewriters alive, nor is it only the nostalgic appeal. There's something older things, right, always have a nostalgic feel. So appeal of the metal body and the stout, well-defined keys that make them popular on eBay. So the other potential benefit, according to the author, is that the nostalgic appeal of the metal body or the stout, well-defined keys that make them popular on the eBay, for the resale or for the selling the old objects sort of it. A typewriter demands something particular. So the author is saying it's not just that the resistance to algorithm and secret surveillance that's keeping them alive, not just that the nostalgic appeal is keeping them alive. The author continues saying a typewriter demands something particular. So he's trying to actually talk about another advantage of typewriters that is making them, keep them alive. That's basically the attentiveness. The typewriter demands attentiveness. By the time paper is loaded, the ribbon tightened, the carriage returned, the spacing and the margins set, there is a big premium on hitting the right key. So the author here is talking about the issue with making a mistake while you type. Right? All the things are set, and then when you type a wrong key, basically you have to restart. You can't edit them, right? So that's why the author is saying that the attentiveness is very important, that is demanded by a typewriter. And then the author also says that means sorting out ideas, pulling together a kind of order and organizing details before actually striking off. So what we do generally, let's imagine a situation that I'm trying to write something. So because I know in a laptop or desktop, in a Word, I can write, I can edit, I can, undo whatever I've written. So we might jump in without thinking and organizing everything in a proper detail, because we have the flexibility to edit it at any point of time. That's basically making us be a little bit, negligent in sorting out the ideas and organizing things properly before we actually write a document. So the author here is sort of arguing that the typewriter makes people to sort out ideas, pull together the order and then organize details so that they avoid the mistakes, because they don't have a second chance in a typewriter. There can be no thinking on screen with a typewriter. That's what the continuation is. Nor are there any easy distractions. No online shopping, no urgent emails, no Twitter. So basically the author is saying what is the other advantage of typewriter is that we don't have any distractions, because typewriter can only do the job of typing a document. Whereas when it comes to a laptop or desktop, I can actually go to an online shopping, look at some urgent emails, I get some messages, I look at Twitter, something. Basically the person who's typing could get distracted from the work. So that's the author's point of view, that typewriters have an advantage over the latest digital technologies. No need even for the electricity. That's another advantage, that we don't need to use electricity. Typewriters do not need electricity. Perfect for writing in a remote hideaway. So basically you can write in a village, or you can write in a forest, wherever you feel, you can write it without the help of technology. So there's no limitation with respect to where you can sit and write with a typewriter. The thinking process is accompanied by encouraging clack of ease. So clack is basically the sound that you make. Clack technically means like a series of sounds. So when you type keys, tuck, 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 right? That's what the typewriter generally make. So that's basically, even you might argue that keyboards in a laptop or desktop make it, but the sound, there's a huge difference in the sound made by a typewriter and a desktop or a PC, a laptop. And the ratchet of the carriage return. So whenever you complete a line and we want to jump to the next line, like how we press enter in a the digital systems like laptops, PCs, we have a ratchet which we have to actually pull it sort of and then get back to the next line. That's like the mechanical movement that we need to do. So the author is basically saying that the thinking process is only accompanied by the sound made by the keys and the ratchet of the carriage return. So sort of he's appreciating the sound made by that. So what is the author doing here? The author started off by saying that typewriters have become obsolete in the digital age, and then he talked some negatives. Then he went about, but they still have some advantage, like they are portable and above all private. And then he continued explaining the point of private, how it is safe and secure with respect to hacking and secret surveillance, etc. And then he continued saying that's not the only advantage that the typewriters get. Right? The nostalgic appeal is another point, and then the major point according to the author is that the typewriter demands something in particular, that's attentiveness. And then the rest of the passage keeps talking about how that is being shown, that is how that's being justified, rather I would put it, that the author is justifying that. So by the time the paper is loaded and all of that, there's a big premium on hitting the right key. So that's basically, you have to be very attentive. You have to sort out ideas, pull things in order and organize details. So there can be no thinking on screen with a typewriter. So you have to be well prepared before you get in front of a typewriter. All of these points are talking about attentiveness. Also, there are no distractions, no shopping, no emails, no Twitter. So that's again in continuation with attentiveness. And finally, he went ahead and talked about no electricity. You can sit anywhere and type. And the typewriters, basically the thinking process is accompanied only by the sound made by the keys and the carriage written. So again, there is also something about you don't have any distraction and you'll be attentive. So the whole set of points talked after the attentiveness are fundamentally supporting how the typewriter can actually make the person be more attentive when he is typing a document. Right? So let's get started with the questions. So the first question, what I'll recommend again is pause now after you have seen the description and the explanation of the passage. Now you might have a better understanding if you had any misunderstanding earlier, and you can give a shot now. So I hope you have checked your answer again. So now let's get into this question. Which one of the following best describes what the passage is trying to do? This is a general question. If you have seen our earlier videos, we have described different types of questions that could be asked in RC. So this is basically a general question. It's more like, asking you which of the following line summarizes or what is the main purpose of the passage, sort of it. So that is what the question is fundamentally asking. So I need to understand what is the main point put forward by the author. First line says it describes why people continue to use typewriters even in the digital age. This looks like a very, very valid point for me, and also the key point that is being talked about. If you see the entire passage, the author is talking about it being obsolete, but also he started describing the benefits of it with respect to the private part where it's very safe to protect the document, and then he talked about the attentiveness part in the rest of the passage along with the point on this nostalgic appeal and etc. So basically he went about talking about the advantage of the typewriter. That is the main point that he was talking about in the whole passage. So here it describes why people continue to use typewriters even in the digital age. But let's look at the other options. It argues that the typewriters will continue to be used even though they are an absolute technology. This is a tricky option. It looks like correct. It seems like the author is said that typewriters, even though they are an obsolete technology, that we are using, right? But the problem is this, that will continue to be used. There's a difference, right? If you say that the typewriters are being used even though they are an obsolete technology, that might look like a decent option, even though you can argue, is it the point that the author is trying to drive? It's something very similar, right? Describes why people continue to use typewriters even in this age. Here the author focused on answering why people are continuing to use, but here it says, it argues that the typewriters will continue to be used. This is a big problem. This is like, we don't know if it will be continued to be used, right? Because this is not something that the author has talked about. He said right now, because of so and so advantages, even in the digital age, people are using the typewriters. This is like talking about the future. Will continue to be used even though they are an obsolete technology. Yes, this is true point. This is true. If the statement was, it argues that the typewriters are being used even though they are an obsolete technology, that is a correct statement, but it is still not the main point made in the passage. Just let's focus on this option. We have also done a video on the potential traps, and this would be the trap. Basically 1 to 2 words are wrong in the statement. See, this set of words are basically making this completely wrong. First of all, the statement itself is a doubtful one. The author is not really talking about the typewriters being used in future as well, will continue to be used. That is something like a big claim that is being made. Right, so basically this option is incorrect. It highlights the personal benefits of using typewriters. This is also a trap, what we've talked about in a trap set of video made on the potential wrong answer options. So this one is basically made out of different parts of passage. Like you would see the word, the author definitely mentioned about the personal benefits, and also benefits. The author is talking about the advantage of using typewriters. You see, if you see this, they are also personal, portable, and above all private. So people who have not understood the passage properly might fall for this trap by just looking, okay, here the personal word is already there in the passage. Authors talked about the personal as a positive point, and then the benefits, it also looks like a valid word to be used, than the typewriters. But this is an absolutely wrong, because the author does not talk about only the personal benefits of using typewriter. He did not classify the benefits as personal and non-personal or anything. He has generally talked about what are the advantages of using typewriters and why they are being used even now. This is like using words of the same passage in the passage but in the wrong sense. The fourth option is an easy option to eliminate. It shows that the computers offer fewer options than the typewriters. The author nowhere talked about the typewriters having more options or less options than computers. The only thing that if you actually think and fall for the trap is when you think that the author talked about distractions, where he said no shopping, no Twitter and all of that. But even there, it's like computer offer actually few more options than typewriters. So nowhere the author actually talked about computers offering fewer options than the typewriters. So this is like a contradicting statement from the passage. Nowhere we see anything are actually out of scope in a way as well. So it's very clear that we can eliminate and we can select the first option. This could be slightly closer option for people who might get confused, but it's clearly option A as the answer. Now let's look at the next question. Again, pause the video, now try it on your own after you understood the passage, after we have explained. Okay, let's continue discussing this. According to passage, some governments still use typewriters. So this one is a specific detail question in our question classification. So the specific detail is basically some governments still use typewriters because. So that's the question. The question is talking about answer why some governments are still using typewriters. So the first option says they do not want to abandon old technologies that may be useful in the future. The author has nowhere talked about this point. This might look like a valid statement for you in a generic sense, right? Even though if you somehow find a logic that they want to safeguard or save the old technologies that might be helpful in the future, that's why they're still using it. The author has nowhere talked about that. The author talked about the governments. This is where the author talked about it, right? They are also private. Type a document, lock it away, and you can give it to people you want to. That is why Russians and US are still using. That's the government reference that they have talked about, so that it's safe from algorithms and secret surveillance. So definitely they are not talking about abandoning old technologies that may be useful in the future. There is like the out of scope. The passage does not talk this point at all. Even if you feel it's a valid statement, it does not answer the question because it's not being mentioned in the passage. They want to ensure that the typewriter production lines remain in the business. Again, same, even if somehow you're convinced that that sounds like a valid statement, this is not answering the question. It's not even mentioned in the passage anywhere that the author said or argued. He just talked about the production lines, yes. That said, there's at least, these, yet it is not just the resistance to algorithm secret surveillance that keeps typewriter production lines in business. And then he continued saying there's so many other benefits of typewriters, which is why people are still using the typewriters. So that is obviously not going to answer your question. They like the nostalgic appeal of typewriter. Again, this is talked in the passage. They said the nostalgic appeal and they are being sold in the eBay. That's one of the reasons why typewriters are still, used or purchased or being made. But it is still not answering the question. This is like a correct statement, but not answering my question. This is, yes, being put up in the passage that some people have the nostalgic appeal of typewriter, but still it's not going to answer my question. Finally, they can control who reads the document. This is the correct option, right? Some governments still use typewriters because they can control who reads the document. This is pretty straightforward. Even if you don't need to even eliminate the options for this, but it's always good to look at the options and make sure that you have selected the right option. It's very clearly said that type a document and lock it away, and that's the only way anyone else can get it is if you give it to them. So that is why the governments are using it. So very clearly that's basically the answer. That's why the option D is correct answer for this. This is very easy question. The last question. The writer praises typewriters for all of the following reasons except. This is a little bit like an inference based question. They do not refer to any specific part. If you see, the whole passage is talking about the typewriters benefits. So the writer has been appreciating the typewriters in different senses with respect to it being safeguarding the data and also attentiveness and other points that he has talked about. So let's look at each option and see which all points are being covered by the author so that I can select them as the wrong option, because the question says the writer praises typewriters for all the following reasons except. I need to pick that option which the author has not talked about in a positive sense about typewriters. Unlike computers, they can be only used for typing. This is a positive point that is being referred by the author. Where? Here he said, nor are there any easy distractions. No online shopping, no emails, no Twitter. So that's basically the problem with the computers, right? Over there you have distractions. In typewriter, we only can type. That's why we won't have any distractions of that sense. So that's why the author talked about this point in the positive sense. He praised typewriters, saying that we won't have any distractions unlike computers, because they can only use for the typing. You cannot revise what you have typed on a typewriter. So that is also something the author has referred to. I'll show you. So he said in the attentiveness part only. A typewriter demands something particular attentiveness. By the time the paper is loaded, ribbon tightened, the carriage written, the spacing and the margin set, there is a big premium on hitting the right key. So that means you have to sort out your ideas, pull together kind of order and organize details before actually striking off. So the author is actually appreciating the fact that we should not make mistake, and that's a big premium to pay if we make a mistake in typewriter. That forces us to actually sort out our ideas and organize things. So that's again talked in the positive sense, because you cannot revise what you have typed in the typewriter. So that's not a correct option to take. Typewriters are noisier than computers. That is also something the author has talked about. Here he referred that the thinking process is accompanied by the encouraging clack of keys and the ratchet of the carriage written. So the typewriters make noise, more noise than computers, but he is appreciating it by saying that the thinking process is accompanied by only the clack of keys and ratchet of carriage written. We don't have any other distractions. Right, so again, this is also not a valid option. Then the last option is typewriters are messier to use than computers. This is not being mentioned anywhere. Even if we consider this as a point similar to this, the ink comes off the ribbon, they weigh a ton, and second thoughts are disaster. As a whole, if you see that they are like a mess, I have to actually carry the ink. There's a good chance that ink might spill, comes off the ribbon, and they're also heavy and stuff like that. If you feel that they are messier than computer in that sense, even if you feel so, but the author is not appreciating that, right? Those points are not actually in the appreciative or positive way. The author said them as a negative, but despite that, we have so many other advantages, which is why people are still using the typewriters. So even if you consider the author has talked about the typewriters being messier to use than computers with respect to that ink coming off the ribbon and the weights, etc., that's still not referred as a positive point. The author is actually considered that to be a negative point in the passage. So typewriters are messier to use than computers is not talked in the passage by the author as a positive point. So he is not praising the typewriter for this reason. That's why the option D is the correct answer.